Thanks everyone for joining us today on just an inauspicious Wednesday, November day. We're going to talk about the holidays are going digital. Are you prepared? Included in today are myself, Jeff, and Brent from Magento. Brent, do you want to introduce yourself? Give a quick update.
Yeah, sure. My name is Brent Peterson. My title is evangelist, so I talk about e-commerce mainly a lot, and I love to just ramble on about e-commerce. I think inevitably it also goes into running. I'm an avid runner. I have a marathon next week, so I'm excited about that, a real in-person race. Um, and then I'm just open to conversations about any platform. So we are a Magento / Adobe partner, and today's topic is around security, mainly from the Magento platform. But I think both Jeff and I have a strong knowledge of the broader e-commerce community and what we could be doing in e-commerce.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brent. And yeah, I'm Jeff Sakasegawa, one of the trust and safety architects with SIFT, plus one on the e-commerce and like fraud prevention side. It's been the totality of my career is working in that space. So, something certainly as a younger person, I may not have thought I would have been so excited about, but always enjoy having conversations around how you can perform a little bit better, whether it's like kind of like payments optimizations or just, maintaining your fraud stack a little better. And we'll talk about both of these topics today and hopefully, share and share alike. So again, please do send those questions as they come up. So agenda, pretty light, pretty standard. We're going to talk about the premise of the webinar itself, just the holidays going digital, some ideas around performance and security, and of course, some tips and tricks on how you can improve and learn from the user journey to, help your own merchant sites. So we're heading into the holidays. I think this is a, familiar site people are used to, you're rushing to get that type of shopping done. There's a hot item, but I think, 2020 being the year that it is, it'll be somewhat different, right? So I think we're expecting a big push, maybe instead of, very frenzied people heading to a store, maybe frenzied hands on keyboards is a little bit more of what we're expecting. So a lot of e-commerce push. I recently saw us speaking, Brent, about like the upper Midwest. I saw like a Target commercial recently where they were talking about, hey, like we traditionally have Black Friday, but now we have like, it's this entire month of November. There's certainly a lot of momentum in that sense of just being online, available, and pushing sales there. And as a note, we're already seeing this type of movement happening for e-commerce itself. This is a statistic from the US Census Bureau that they published just recently. But one thing that was interesting is it's already reaching the point of around like $1 in every $5 spent in the last quarter was online for like e-commerce. And again, heading into Q4, kind of expecting a lot of this to increase quite a bit. Brent, are you kind of seeing similar things to these types of statistics, this type of sentiment from the Magento side?
Yeah, definitely. I think from the e-commerce side in general, it was always trending to be more online. Like, year over year, the trend was up, and you can see from the graph that you have presented there that the trend in e-commerce is to go online, and having your store ready for that was important. But this year, it's kind of like the tipping point. Like, hey, we're not gonna be able to do that huge sale to get thousands of people to try to crowd up to your door. Now there's going to be thousands of people that want to crowd up to your website. So part of this is, there's a whole bunch of new things that adds into this in terms of security, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of speed, all those little things that weren't as important 10 years ago, and certainly weren't even thought about 50 years ago. Now suddenly, in 1 year, in 6 months, or and during this 16-year pandemic since March that we've had, that has become so imperative as a store owner to be ready for this surge that you could get. And just specifically answer your question, I think what we've seen is the people that are looking forward into their web store or into their e-commerce site. They're doubling down now to be prepared for this, knowing that whatever investment they're making into that is going to pay off in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like a lot of times conversations I would have around this or like checkout flows is, some program manager would usually assess this on like, a fraction of a second, right? Like, hey, this, how much latency does this add? What does this look like for our flow? But like you said, if you look at it just solely in a single order, it's like a fraction of a cent. Like, is this perceptible to a normal consumer? But when you add that up with like all of the volume, those fractions of a second add up really quickly and then lead to a lot of, like, not discomfort isn't the right word, but just like more delays than you might anticipate. So I think it's something a lot of people are kind of having a very serious talk internally about, and what they could be doing better.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Just to interrupt really quickly, for a clarification in the questions, they're asking if the figures are from the U.S. market only.
Yes, yeah. Apologies. That's a U.S. Census Bureau statistic. So just from that market. However, I think there are larger, like if you look at Mary Meeker's annual like statistics, she had one earlier this year. There are general observations globally that are very similar from like an e-commerce increase as a like total percentage of like retail sales. Great question though. Please keep them coming. So we talked about speed and volumes. Thanks to Magento, I was able to pull two statistics that I really enjoyed that I wanted to share with the audience here today that kind of blew my mind. So I just, again, relying on Brent's intelligence and experience to kind of frame this conversation. But one I thought that was really interesting, 40% of people abandon websites that take more than 3 seconds to load. Again, like in my head that seems so tough because maybe if you're in a place where connectivity isn't great, or you're just trying to shop or buy something. I know if I was buying something, maybe I'd wait that for a second, but certainly not something we're observing in the market. And then when you think about like everyone kind of follows Amazon into how they tend to operate. Walmart Plus, right, is kind of a big offering where they're kind of echoing that. Both of those companies are also putting an import on, just speed and seconds saved, right? So a 10% increase in revenue for every second they shave from their load time. So you kind of see this interesting kismet of like, if you can keep customers on, keep that load time low, you directly convert that to revenue.
Yeah, and I saw another statistic that every 100 milliseconds well, this is from Amazon, but every 100 milliseconds slowdown in the cart causes a 1% drop in sales.
Whoa.
I mean, that's a really small
Yeah.
amount, but if you think about the volume that Amazon is doing, that statistic becomes suddenly very, very relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of times I would think about that, or you would have conversations around that with like fields you might include, and like, hey, if you have to add an extra point of, well, friction, depending on how you elect to look at it, like something that a customer has to actively input, you would see similar drop-offs in checkouts. So it's interesting to map that back to like a millisecond kind of measure, but it makes sense. Next, so again, I talked about like my experience in the fraud prevention space. Anytime I hear like instant settlement, like check out now, my like kind of hairs on the back of my neck stand up, because a lot of times I think about, hey, I'm actually removing the time that I normally would have had to make an assessment of a particular order and or user, depending on what you're reviewing at the time. So, I think a good question a lot of people have is, well, if speed wins, we have to do this to make more revenue for our company. How do we counterbalance this against, doing our due diligence and actually making sure that we're preventing fraud from happening on our platform? Brent, I know you had shared an anecdote with me about someone in your travels that would actually call customers quite regularly? Could you share with us there?
Yeah, especially in the emerging markets when it's not, when maybe their buyers aren't as sophisticated, but there's a lot more opportunities for fraud. Um, and maybe there's not a service that's available like SIFT, or there wasn't at the time. They would physically call almost every order unless they know the client. They would have a call center of say 20 or 30 people, and they would make sure that that's a good order. So if you imagine that, if you make that over and a lot of people, at some point it becomes impossible.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those things too in managing a team that like had to make calls. You start to, again, talking about seconds. When you think about call times, having to explain why you're calling, customers often have questions like, is my order still processing? What's going on? How do I know you're actually from this company? And those conversations tend to always increase in time longer than probably what you would want. And again, to your point, Brent, exactly, like if you say, let's budget 3 minutes a call, that's just, very back of the envelope math times a million calls. It's like, how do we come up with 3 million, minutes worth of, call coverage? Like, I don't know if you do. So it becomes like a very tough problem to solve very quickly, depending on your volumes and how you're setting up your call structure.
Yeah, and I think one small point that SIFT has a great win on that is that if you know your customer and they've logged in, you assume that they're a good customer. But I think some of the things that you help with is if that behavior is outside of what the normal behavior is. So if they're logging in from Eastern Europe and they're a client out of, California, maybe we know this customer, but maybe this customer has been compromised and we should flag that order for some reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll have some more slides on that. Thank you, Brent. I'll keep progressing. But yeah, that's an important part is how do we understand the customer? And that should present itself from what we've seen historically, and also, how they present themselves in the moment, right? Like exactly like you said, is someone really traveling out of the country at the moment? Like, should we expect that for them to be in Eastern Europe? Or have we ever seen that before? Or is there just larger populations of fraud attempts that we're seeing from that region? Like all of these things can be very informative for how you want to assess any given order. Now, one thing we wanted to make sure to understand is like, I'll definitely talk in the next couple of slides about like a fraud prevention standpoint, like what we can learn, but there's definitely things like our marketing arms can help tell us about, our customers and how we can serve them better. I know, Brent, you had talked about, personal experiences and, social interactions you had with respect to customer support. Can you kind of walk us through some of the bullets here and, your experiences and insights?
Yeah, so I know specifically Delta Airlines has been really good at monitoring their social channels. And before the pandemic, you could easily just direct message them on Twitter and say, "Hey, I'm having this issue here." Or in the case of a store owner, there are a lot of customers that if they're having an issue on checkout, the first thing they may do is go to your Twitter feed and they just blast out, "I'm on XYZ store. Look at, I'm stuck in the checkout. It's just give me, this is like the worst experience in my life. I'm going somewhere else," right?
Yep.
The good merchants are monitoring that feed, and they are responding to those clients and helping them right away. The ones that kind of let you go, and I won't give the example because I actually really like the brand, but it was a running shoe brand. And it's like, oh man, this shoe there's something wrong. Hey, can you guys help me? And nobody ever responded to that tweet. So it's like, if you think of your social media as just outbound, you are looking at your social media wrong. That is a channel that people will try to would like to talk to you back on. And I think as a merchant, if your goal is to communicate with your clients through this outbound channel, get ready to also take it in, just like you'd always respond to an email or you'd pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Or if you're at a retail store, somebody walks into your store, you're not going to ignore them. Think of all those channels as being the same. And if you can't, if you can't respond to them, for example, I do post a lot of things on Instagram, but I'm always not good at responding to people on Instagram. And this is just for fun, but
Yeah.
sometimes I go back and say, well, somebody asked me a question 2 weeks ago on Instagram. Oh crap, I forgot to answer them. So that's just an example. If you're not monitoring and your goal is to communicate and you're not, that actually brings down that whole experience for the client on that one small channel, but could impact the entire journey that they have in that store.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gives you a nice opportunity because, that may be the one time that your customer actually reaches out to you for support. Unfortunately, it's, when they're actually in some distress or needing assistance. But again, if you can provide a good experience through that, that's a really good way to kind of build that customer loyalty and say like, hey, I actually started in a bad spot and you really turned that around for me. Like those are things that definitely tend to resonate and stick with customers long term. Excellent.
Yeah, so I think the next thing you have on the list is kind of testing your campaigns. So in terms of if you go back and look at what you're doing with email, like everybody has been doing email for a long time now, and they like to test how's my click through, what am I getting out of that? You need to do the same thing with your social media. You should be looking at every single aspect of your campaign and figuring out, is this successful in what we're doing? And trying things that increase the conversion rate of whatever that campaign is. The ultimate goal of your campaign is to increase your customers, to increase sales, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're again just out there blindly tweeting or blindly putting out Instagram posts or whatever the channel is, and you're never testing it, you never know if you're successful at it. And you never really know if something's not working. You want to know if something's not working and then you want to kind of turn it to how it can work. So it's a pretty simple approach, but I think a lot of people are seeing this as more of a monolithic approach to say email and seeing how well email does. But we need to think about it as a holistic approach to all the channels you have in terms of communications and marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can't just be like the outbound, like sending the initial message is like the success metric of like, hey, we sent 10 million of these things. It's like, sure, we did. But like again, how do we measure the success of those like 10 million cents? It's a great way to assess things.
Yeah, so the next thing I have on that list there is getting your client email. So you do want to know who your client is. And again, when it comes back to security, the more you know your client, the more secure you as a merchant feel when you're selling to that client. And the more opportunities you have to interact with that client. So as a merchant, you do want to get information to follow up. So this is not, there's a two-pronged approach to this. Number one, you would like to have their email so you could market to them again. But number two, you would like to also thank them for coming to you with this question and following up with something that may not be related directly to sales, but related to customer service and support and all the things that you're happy about with your client. So, going back to Delta again, when I interact with them on Messenger, like now they have a whole texting thing,
Mm-hmm.
I immediately get a survey, and it's a little bit annoying, but I usually fill them out. Like in the final question that they always say is, would you hire this person if they came to you for a job? Right. So if you have a really bad experience, you're like, no way, I'm never going to hire them. But if you had a great experience, you'd say, yeah, these people were fantastic. Of course I would hire them. So going back to like getting to know your client, get their email address, all those things help you learn what you're doing and if that is successful or not. And if you don't measure that, you're never going to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's that idea kind of spills over to the fourth bullet, just as a personal overshare. I'm in the market for a new mattress at the moment. And I've been shopping and I've noticed that some of the sites I'll go to, in order to get, a sense of like total bill with like taxes and stuff, it's like, hey, give us your name, your email address. I'll go look at some other site for some other mattresses, things like that. But ones that did collect an email and kind of know who I am have been like reaching back out to me like, hey, did you forget to buy this like super comfortable latex, blah, blah, blah. And it's something like I probably should have understood they would do, but I'd say kudos to them for making me like keep that mind share of, I mean, I'm talking about it on a recorded webinar now. Like, hey, yeah, maybe I did really like something about this mattress where I would actually want to purchase from them, or it's keeping them, in the short list of consideration. So really something that's important, I think, for a lot of merchants to do, and don't feel like cart abandonment necessarily is the end of that life cycle, provided you put effort into getting that customer back.
Yeah, and I think the biggest point you've made there is if you test to see what your competitors are doing, and
Hmm.
their competitors are doing that's something attractive to you, that's something you should also be trying. So definitely, I've been on sites where I put something in my cart or I viewed something, and then start getting emails, and retargeting is the best one. Like, oh, I looked at the Adobe site, and now all of a sudden I'm getting slammed with Adobe ads in every single place I go. I mean, that's one thing, but a cart abandonment is when you're looking at a specific product and they either ask you, did you forget? Like, hey,
Hmm.
forget about this, or sometimes they even come back and say, hey, by the way, we noticed that you left this in your cart 5 days ago. Here's 10% off if you'd like to come and get it today. So the downside, of course, to that is, hey, people may just go in and wait for the 10% off, which is probably less likely, but
Yeah.
the goal is that you're following up. The ones that never follow up are the ones you forget about, the ones
Yep.
you don't go back to. So, and there's a balance too with how much you want to follow up with them, but you do want to make sure that you are attaching, or you are kind of helping the customer along to complete that journey. I think the worst thing you could do then would be is if they bought that product and they, for whatever reason, went back and had the same product in the cart again, and then all of a sudden you start getting emails that said, "Hey, don't you want to buy this product?" When you've already bought it. So, having a good AI behind that cart abandonment is really important.
Yep. Good to dedupe those. And then I know, I must admit I'm a little Hotjar ignorant, but I know, Brent, you said this might be something that could also drive insights for merchants.
Yeah, and yeah, we're also new to Hotjar. We've started using it in the last 6 months or so, and it's been very interesting to see where people go and what people click on, and then watching. They do sort of a scrubbed down version of, if somebody's been on their site, you can view a recording of what they've been doing to see what people click on. Like, people like will scroll all over the place, and sometimes they're clicking on some text that are like, wow, I didn't realize it. Or I think just from a heat map standpoint, you can see on a page where everybody's clicking or where some people aren't clicking. And that gives you a good idea that, hey, this is popular or this isn't popular. And a lot of people will go right to the bottom, right to your footer, and they'll click on something there.
Yeah.
So that you can get a lot of insights, and I think that's learning the learning from your customer how they're viewing their site is the most important thing you can do as a merchant, because you can't necessarily see them walking into your store and not looking at that end cap and walking right through and doing something else. The only way you can see it is by kind of looking at what they're doing on their site at that time, and then taking that back, tweaking it, trying, A/B testing or whatever you want to do to get people to click on the things you would like them to get on. So Hotjar is just another tool that helps to get there. And there's Crazy Egg. There's a number of tools that work in that capacity. But for a marketer, this is something that you can do now that doesn't add any overhead to your site, or very little overhead. that helps you understand your customer journey. And I think right now, because we're going to see so much more traffic, you're going to get a really good indication what a lot of people are going to do on your site. So, something like that would be something you could add without a lot of impact.
Yeah, and I'm gonna just tease that into the next couple of slides. I love that idea of like the anecdote of like, you think traditional loss prevention or, you know, working in a store and being able to see, where people flow within the store. The same anecdote going online is very similar. There's a lot of like navigational behavioral insights that you can take when, dealing with e-commerce. So if you think about, you know, tracking the path someone takes, what kind of quantities they order, what items they tend to search for, shipping methods, et cetera, et cetera. All of these can be very informative for assessing fraud as well. So we can learn how to, market better to our legitimate customers, but also keep, fraudsters out from a similar exercise, right? So a way we like to talk about this at SIFT is we have like a SIFT score. So we kind of use the stoplight convention here. You're like green, good, red, bad, 0, good, 100 is on the higher end. But again, as a customer is going through the user journey, having an understanding of what's happening there can change your assessment in real time when you leverage a technology like machine learning. And again, what you're trying to do is map that back to what you have an understanding of either historically for this customer or for like your merchant site overall, right? So if, hey, we tend to observe that accounts with older email ages are, less risky, that could affect review in a certain way. If we expect a certain browsing time for people to shop online, and deviations from there may change our assessment. And of course, if we have like strong correlations or linkages to past fraud, then that could also change the experience you elect to provide this, fraudster. Or conversely, a legitimate consumer that you actually want to serve, maybe someone that, again, if you're trying to shave those seconds we talked about earlier, expediting checkout, removing certain fields, just getting them through the funnel as quickly as possible becomes really important.
Yeah, I think an interesting one that you've brought up in the past is this browsing items on sale, like browsing certain items and looking for that deal and spending extra time on that would be a good indicator that if somebody's just going right to the most expensive thing and buying it, that it might not be them. I've never really thought about that metric, but I really think I like that analogy.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's a kind of a tried and true thing, so it's a little long in the tooth, but a lot of times what you'll tend to observe from fraudsters is they'll go to the higher priced items and like kind of max quantity out, or they'll do like max quantity -1 because they're like, oh, to buy the most expensive thing in the highest quantity is a little too suspicious, so I'll just order one less than that. But yeah, agreed, where, if you're thinking about a normal consumer is usually looking for a deal. I know if you were to if SIFT were to dissect my purchase behavior, I usually try to find promotion codes as much as possible. So like on the checkout page, I'm probably punting like, 5 or 6 just to see what the biggest discount I can get is. But that would be an interesting way to observe me in a similar sense. So it's like, if I can't get something on sale, I'm going to try and get it at the tail end on checkout.
Yeah, they have yours dialed into. Make sure he waits 12 hours in checkout because he's gone off to look for coupon codes.
Pretty much, yeah, I know. They got me pegged. And again, like as a kind of holistic way, you can kind of think about this for your own sites or your own e-commerce like world is, again, Brent and I are just kind of encouraging you to consider using more of this information, right? You may already be tracking this, from a marketing perspective, if you're using a technology like SIFT from a fraud side, but all of these things in concert together really give you a richer understanding of your customers. And then, what you necessarily want to do with those customers, which is kind of where we get to like actually improving the customer journey. Apologies, again, this may be a little more US centric example, but I'm hopefully this person is a little more, universally known. So we've talked about leveraging technology. What are you going to do with it? And this is kind of my holiday appeal to you all. So if we kind of have three true populations, as represented by our three different Grinches here, you kind of have your naughty, your nice, and then maybe someone that you actually just need to verify. Like in Brett's example, this might be someone you actually want to get on the phone with, or request them to contact you back. And not surprisingly, you kind of map these back to how you want to treat the orders or the interactions you have with these customers too, right? Your nice customers, those that seem a little lower risk or you have a strong confidence in from like marketing insights, these are people that you generally want to work with. You want to encourage them to buy. So you want to allow them, as much access and, purchases as possible. If you actually need to verify, potentially on a really high value order or something that's a little atypical, you don't need to block out, right? But something that maybe you just get in touch with that consumer about and understand if this is actually a legitimate order. And then of course, if someone is actively, trying to defraud your website, if you have these understandings, people like fraudsters tend to do this not just once but many times over. These are things that you should start blocking, like especially all those future events. Like you can learn about what to block, like that's always valuable, but all those subsequent blocks is really where you find a lot of value over time.
And I've actually heard that when the reason the Grinch was so crabby in the show is because he originally went onto an e-commerce site to buy his sled that he had to use to deliver, and he got blocked when he was completely
Yes.
legitimate.
Yes. And so, if you can speak to that person and grow their heart a little bit, you can really change them. So again, just it comes full circle. Like this is how you can improve, a lifetime customer and, get them out with all your happy other who's its and what's its.
Yeah, lifetime customers through Dr. Seuss.
Exactly. um, So one thing, Brent and I talked about quite a lot in talking about like a holidays webinar is, a lot of times when we'll talk with merchants, they're like, hey, we're heading into a code freeze. December is kind of like nothing really happens. You're talking to us on November the 4th. Like, can we even do anything realistically? I would argue yes. There's a lot of ways that you can achieve this. Magento and SIFT has an integration. So if you're already leveraging Magento services, we can kind of plug into there like you would any other Magento plugin there. SIFT is also, just launched a connected hub. So if you work with certain payment providers or something, you can feed particular attributes into, our machine learning systems. And then, Magento also offers, services to actually review the performance of your website to understand, you might not be able to institute all fixes, but there are probably certain small things that you can get pretty meaningful wins over. Brent, do you feel like there's still time? I'm certainly making my appeal here, but are you feeling that as well when we talk to the audience today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, from a performance standpoint, a lot of at this time of the year, maybe as a merchant, maybe your staff has grown in terms of marketing and things like that. And sometimes large images can creep into your homepage, or sometimes people have this idea that loading a carousel with 5,000 products is a great idea to stick on your homepage. Magento does allow you to do a lot of these things that without proper testing and maybe without a lot of knowledge will slow your site down. So some simple things like just doing a performance review, targeting your homepage and maybe some of your product pages are something that you can do now, and you can learn, oh yeah, I can see that there's 7 large images that are more than a gig each that are just like, that's why our site is so slow. So
Yep.
some of those things that it's now you're in code freeze, so no, we can't do a lot of programmable changes on your homepage, but you could look at that and say, I can increase my performance by doing XYZ, and all those things are at the admin level. All those things are done by our team, and stripping out some of the things that were in there that were causing that heavy page load can be done without the intervention of a developer. And I think those are the most important things to look at what you can do now in terms of performance. I will say that installing the extension for SIFT is very light. So if you were doing one last little code push right now and you wanted to get that in, that is something that you could definitely do now, and have that fraud prevention in advance of a big holiday sales wave. But the little things like just looking at your performance, your site, using some simple tools that are out there online. If you have some back end tools, you can dive into those a little bit. But the big things are, what is your team doing and how are they doing it? The other thing would be adding, a lot of things on your navigation that now is a holiday and it's confusing people. So going back to the Hotjar item, looking at people clicking out a lot and then focusing on those pieces now are some of those last minute things that you can do to help you as a merchant have better experience for the end users.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I generally encourage people to do is, like, in my work life, I always have this phrasing of like, do yourself a kindness. There probably is a lot of stuff like a full stack, like SIFT integration, like truthfully, like probably wouldn't happen before the end of the year this year. But there's still ways, in working with Magento, that plugin, you could certainly get out the door. Things like that. Don't like close your off to like all possibilities. Like, just explore, see what the actual like realistic timelines are. And if you can work with that and budget appropriately, get resources, then like by all means, like help yourself out. And of course, if you want more information, Brent and I are available, or you can check out our websites, things like that. So as we come around the bend, please do send more questions. We'd love to answer those. But in closing, just in summation, again, e-commerce is leading our digital rush for the holidays. Try to make sure you're prepared as much as possible. Again, like we just said in the last slide, it's not too late. Find those ways that you can help yourself, leverage those insights that you may already be collecting to help better customer journeys, loyalties, things like that, and also maintaining good fraud prevention. And just try to learn from these things as much as possible. Like, if this is something you haven't done historically, there are certainly partners you can work with, like the two here on this webinar, that can help you understand that, and really drive that long-term value. So with that, wanted to say thank you. That's all our presented content, but
we do have a ton of questions.
Okay, cool.
You guys are ready for those?
Shoot.
Yeah, let's go.
First question. Do you think that brands need to adapt in parallel a mobile channel strategy to enable users entering into a mobile commerce environment? What's the penetration of mobile towards online?
Yeah, great question. I don't have the numbers like offhand, but I would say what we've observed from the SIFT side of the house is definitely more mobile traffic. Like, we have an trust and safety index report that we put out quarterly, where, like, for the first time this year, we actually saw more fraud attempts on mobile than on the desktop. So I think when you think about actual shopping, a lot of that is being driven by apps more than actual just like www sites. So I think the blend is shifting. I think it's important for companies and merchants to consider leveraging these things, if not like a full-fledged application, at least something that kind of dynamically shifts to like the dimensions of a phone, so your interactions with that are a little smoother. I think it's worth doing, again, like not just for in this moment, but long term, as purchase behaviors change, as people spend more like on the go, or they have more time on the device. I think it's just only additive. What do you think, Brent?
Yeah, and I think if you're designing something new, you should be thinking mobile first, because it's a lot easier to think about what is the minimum that I need to have on my page. That's the most important, and then grow it out to desktop. The trend is definitely going to mobile first, and we just did a webinar last week, and I had those numbers, but I'm not good at memorizing all that stuff. It is approaching. I'm going to say 50%. I know that in the emerging markets, that most people don't have a desktop, and a lot of that transactions is done completely on the phone. And now with progressive web apps becoming more widely available, you are going to see the shift to a lot more people using their mobile device or their tablet device to purchase. And I think the strategy should be the same for desktop or mobile. The bottom line strategy for purchasing on the mobile is a lot of people just buy one thing. They're not going to browse a lot. Like, they're going to find something specific. So making that journey easier for them to buy that one thing is probably the most important part.
Next question. Great. Do you think that channels like TikTok and WhatsApp will play an important role in online sales? WhatsApp is introducing new services that will enable business users to sell directly on the platform, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of it is, again, Brent talked about like maybe not being the most responsive on Instagram. I can certainly tell you I've purchased more off of that than what I normally, like I would have considered normally when I think about, how I buy a shirt or, a pair of shoes. There is something to be said about like being in the moment. Like, if you're able to target appropriately, if you're having a conversation around sneakers and you actually need to buy some shoes, like being able to directly communicate in a place where consumers are, I think is just, again, only of a benefit to you. What I do think will probably take some time to like educate consumers on is like, hey, this is actually a channel in which you should expect to like have some kind of like consumer engagement with, not just like share photos of a cat, for example. But I like TikTok, especially like when you think about like influencers, again, sorry, US centric statistic, but I think there's like over 100 million like monthly active Americans on TikTok right now. Like, where those eyeballs are, like marketers and salespeople will generally follow.
Yeah, and it's interesting. All I post on TikTok is pictures of cats. So I'm looking at my feed, and I try to convert those into sales, and so far it hasn't worked yet.
Okay.
I do agree that something like WhatsApp or some of these other ones that are being integrated. Like, for example, we did an extension with this company called Link Mobility, where they've been able to integrate SMS and WhatsApp so they can start communicating with clients through your Magento site. So we are going to see more integrations like that. On the flip side, I know that a couple of years ago, I was at IRCE and Snapchat was there, and they're pushing this whole commercial part of their business. And just maybe I'm not so in tune with that, but I haven't seen a lot of traction in terms of PPC on Snapchat or retargeting on Snapchat. I'm sure it's happening, but it's not happening in the pace that it's happened like on the especially the Instagram side. You do see a lot more purchases directly from Instagram, and I think there's an extension that allows you to purchase directly from Instagram onto your Magento store. So you do have to kind of weigh out what are the important channels that you would like to participate in, and then figure out, and of course your audience too. Is your audience a TikTok user or are there somebody that never has even heard of it? So there's a lot of aspects to that.
Great. Next question. Conversations in real time while being online. Conversations in real time while being online can help and guide customers, building trust and awareness. What do you think of omnichannel chat layers?
Yeah, omnichannel chat layers. If you can walk a client, and this is perfectly possible in Magento, but walk a client from their mobile device onto their desktop device if you can keep that person engaged across all those different channels, that's imperative in and having a nice, smooth customer journey as they go through channels.
Yep. And then to give the creepy big brother kind of answer too, this could be really helpful for like fraud assessment too. If you have an ability to track like a login, you know, from desktop or mobile to desktop, things like that, you can often, you know, again, assess those and then map them back to like what you've seen historically for that user. So if it's like maybe the mobile device was new to you as a merchant, but like, oh, we did have past purchases from them from this web, you know, this, you know, laptop and browser, stuff like that. It can give you a better comfort in actually making sure that you continue to service them appropriately or not.
Okay, next question. How do you see e-commerce evolving in emerging markets? Do you believe that smartphone penetration and internet spread will play a vital role?
Yeah, I don't want to, you know, steal Brent's what he said previously, but yeah, absolutely. If you think about, you know, just technology leaps, you know, from like just the processing power of a phone and what you're able to do with that is really helpful. Plus, you know, as 5G penetration becomes larger wherever you live, and you think about, you know, your connectivity is more online, available to you wherever you are in the moment. I just think it's just going to continue to drive that way, especially when you think about emerging markets and maybe a larger piece of hardware might be untenable for your purchase power. There probably is some kind of format of a phone, even if it's, you know, a couple cycles older, that could get you online and purchasing relatively quickly. So I think that'll definitely drive a lot, but I think a lot of the supporting like connectivity investments that a lot of countries are making will really help speed that up once those are actually live and functioning.
Yeah, I think just to add on, the way a lot of these apps work, especially on your phone, they don't have a either they don't have a desktop version, or the desktop version doesn't do half the things that the mobile version does. So if that's any indication of what's going to happen in the mobile first buying things, we should be looking at mobile all the time. And you know, I think if you have your mobile phone and you have your internet everywhere. A lot of people don't have good internet at their house, especially in emerging markets. So you don't want to try to have somebody tether their device to their computer to buy something. They're going to buy something on their device.
Yep, exactly. I was gonna say, a lot of times what I've noticed for like recent apps I've downloaded is if I actually go to like maybe I'm thinking with my older kind of like 90s internet brain, I'll go to their website to get like support. It'll actually redirect me back to the app. It's like, hey, we have an app on like iOS and the Google Play Store. Like, go there. Like, don't come here, basically. So it seems like a lot of the websites are in effect just calling cards for the app.
Yeah, my 80s version of that just sends me back to a bulletin board that you dial up on.
Little BBB board, huh?
Yep.
So we have one more question, and then we can wrap up. Do you think that brands will have to adapt a more personal approach to customers, speaking on their emotion during these difficult days, instead of inventing sales pitches via massive promotions?
Well, that's sort of a loaded question when you interject the emotion part about these days. I think in general, targeting your content to that user is the way it's happening. And as our technology gets better, that becomes a lot easier for merchants to do. And knowing your customer, obviously from a security standpoint, but from a marketing standpoint, getting things in front of them that they would like or you think they're going to like is the best way to sell to your customer. So yes, definitely that's where it's all going.
Yeah, for sure. I was gonna say, yeah, I think what hopefully any company could do is just be more empathetic. So, you know, that doesn't need to be targeted, just, you know, the way you correspond with customers. And, you know, I think everyone has those experiences positively. Like Brent's like, hey, would you hire this person? Those more interactions you have with someone that you would want to hire just helps there. But from a more targeted perspective, yeah, maybe there's more shift around necessity versus kind of, just like desirable purchases or just things on a whim that maybe might be more helpful for companies, depending on what you sell and are offering, that maybe you target towards more trusted customers. Like, I don't know how you'd actually want to slice and dice that, but you can certainly see like, hey, if we're worried that, you're not going to spend as much, you just need this one thing, being able to identify that and then serve what would be of most help to any given customer, maybe a way you can achieve that.
Yeah, and a simplistic way of looking at this, if Jeff and I were equal in the eyes of a merchant, and that merchant sold hair care products, and they're targeting both of us for shampoo and conditioner, I can tell you eventually I am just going to unsubscribe from their list because I don't need either. But there may be some other product like ear hair trimmers that I would need. So, if you do all the hair care things, that you want to know what your customer is. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be on video, but I don't have any hair, and Jeff has a lot of hair. And knowing what your customer needs is really important. And you can get my history. The last time I bought any shampoo was like 1982. So that if I'm online buying things, it's going to be different than what Jeff is, and you should present those things that are interesting to that person, rather than just sort of the shotgun approach where you're giving them everything.
Well said.
All right. Is that all the questions, Natalie?
Yep, that's it for the questions.
Great. Yeah, this was good. Lots of questions.
Yeah.
And just to let you know, we didn't see those written, so I didn't see them written. So.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's trying to look into the camera. So yeah, I didn't see them either. But thank you so much for sending all of those. Again, if you want to get in contact with us, you can check out SIFT stuff at sift.com, or you can email me directly, JSAK at sift.com if you have any questions. Brent, I don't know if you want to share any contact information or ways people get in touch with you.
Yeah, I'm Brent at Wagento with a W, just like Magento, but with the upside down M. So Wagento, and on Twitter is Brent W Peterson, and actually on Instagram I'm Brent W Peterson. But on Instagram you'd only see me giving selfies while running, so it's not that exciting. And cats on TikTok.
Well, I'm glad to hear it's just the runs and not on the bike ride. So you're being safe.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. This has been good. And again, thank you everybody for joining. We will be republishing this webinar, so you'll be able to revisit some of the things that we had here. And Jeff, again, thank you. This has been really, for me, it's been informative.
Yeah, ditto. Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for sharing, Brent, and thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.